Okay. I'd like to pass a couple things around, circulate them while I'm doing my talk. Can I start them here? Yeah, I'm counting these pieces. So. I have a few more pieces up here in a box, and if you're interested, you can come take a look. I just don't want to pass everything around because it's too many little pieces. So this is either going to make you hungry for lunch or take away your appetite. I don't know. I started this whole process one time when I was looking in an antique store, and I found a little bone box made with threaded lids, with a threaded lid. And that started the whole process of wanting to learn how to do threaded boxes and turning bone. And the thing that interested me was that it looked so much like ivory, but I knew that it was indeed bone, so that was even more of a challenge. Oh, here, wrong button. I always like to see where other people work, and I just took a picture of this shop. This is no longer my shop. We sold our house and this big metal building. This was out behind our house. We lived on a dead-end road, and the county never even knew that we built this. It was 40 by 48, had 21 feet at the peak and 14-foot sidewalls. It was a big metal building, and it was a delightful shop over the years. And this is the raw product on the hoof. And I'm going to take you through the process of the cooking and how I treat the bone and prepare it for the final use. I start with a big pressure cooker, not a pressure cooker, like a turkey cooker out on the outside. This is not something, I suppose you could do it in the kitchen and throw a few onions and garlic in there and make soup stock. It probably wouldn't be a bad thing. I've collected these bones. Particular bones came from a butcher shop, and I have the butcher cut the knuckles off because there's nothing in the knuckles that is usable to me. And I don't want to take these bones home with the knuckles on them and cut them on my own bandsaw. Let them do that cutting of the bloody bones on their own, on the meat cutting bandsaw. So that's kind of what I start with, and here's some other miscellaneous pieces that are going to get cooked in the pot. And I put a little bit of dishwashing liquid, dishwasher soap in with it because I want it to kind of cut the grease and the oil. And I don't boil the heck out of this. I want to make sure that I simmer it for probably less than an hour. I want it to just barely loosen the flesh and get the marrow out of the middle. And those are the tools of the trade. There's a little brush and a spatula and a knife, and I carve out this part that's left over from the knuckles to make an opening so I can get the marrow and the stuff out of the middle of the bone. I cook them. This is what they look like after the first cooking. You can still see there's quite a bit of oil in the bone. And I do this a second time, and this is what they kind of look like the second time around. After you've got the majority of the flesh, scrape it off, get it off as best you can. And this is another time, don't cook it more than, you don't boil the heck out of it all day long. You just barely simmer it for about an hour. And the bleaching process, I've tried several different ways of getting the bone whiter, but the easiest, safest, and the best way is hydrogen peroxide, right from the drugstore. It's 3%. It's H2O2. When the one oxygen molecule evaporates, it's H2O, which is water. You can pour it out on the ground when you're finished. You can splash it on your hands. You're not going to burn your skin. You could drink it if you wanted to. There are stronger hydrogen peroxide solutions, like we used to use a stronger one in our hot tub, but it's dangerous. It would, if you got it on your skin, it would burn your skin. So this is what I've used for years. And you want to put it in an airtight container. I put the bones down in the bucket, wrapped up in plastic, completely submerged in the hydrogen peroxide. I watch for it on sale at the drugstore. Sometimes if it's on sale like 50 cents a bottle, I'll buy a whole case of it at a time. So you completely wrap them up and airtight. And the hydrogen peroxide is active for about 3 to 5 days. It'll bubble and fizz, and at the end of that time, when it's quit bubbling, the action has stopped. This particular bone is one that somebody sent to me, and you can see that it's kind of disintegrated. This particular bone was bleached with laundry bleach. Somebody thought this was a good idea and sent me some bleached bones. And I just use this as an example that you don't want to use the laundry bleach because it does disintegrate the bone, whereas the hydrogen peroxide does not disintegrate the bone at all. And if you don't get the oil out, it does tend to kind of bleed back into the bone a little bit. If you don't get all of the oil out of that, it's kind of a honeycomb surface in there, but you could throw it back in the hydrogen peroxide and bleach it. And if you don't want to do all that, if you just want to try it, you can go to the pet store and buy bones that are already prepared, bleached. And my concern when I tried these was that maybe they would be over-processed and they'd be brittle or want to split more easily, but I couldn't tell any difference between these bones and the bones that I prepared myself. And the advantage is that you can look for bones that are rounder or have a flatter surface or have a thicker, thicker edge for doing thicker items. That's a huge advantage of going to the pet store. There was a period of time when all I could find were the bones that had been stuffed with cream, cheese whiz or barbecue flavor or whatever, peanut butter. I couldn't find just the plain bone, but so they're easier to find now than other times. Sometimes you find them laying out in the desert. So it's this is bleached by the sun. So in this talk, I'm going to go through the process of making a box with a threaded lid, and I'll talk about different shapes of bones. These are just some pictures of different shapes of bones, and what the bones that I like to use for boxes are basically it's the thigh bone, but I'm going to show you a few others. This is the cannon bone. I was able to find these bones at pet stores, and I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was a different animal or a camel or a pig or something, but come to find out it's actually it's a part of the cannon bone, the part of the hoof of the animal. And here's an actual picture of that bone. But the nice thing about it, the attractive thing about it, is it has a really thick wall right there. And I've made items out of that thicker portion, and it's fairly straight. There's a letter opener up here on the table that's about 7 inches long, and is made from one of those thicker areas of the bone. I've also turned cow hoof. You can find those in pet shops too. Doesn't smell very good. I should say that the bone dust is not something you want to breathe. For safety reasons, you try not to breathe it in. It's not something your lungs can process and get rid of. I'm still standing here, so I must have been doing something right. I have a little vacuum attachment that I have right by the lathe when I'm turning the bone, and it sucks the dust away. But it does, when you're doing the rose engine work, it does just sort of float up all the little belts, and then it floats out and covers your whole shop. But you could wear a mask, I guess. So here's some other shapes of bones. You can see there's some that have quite a bit thicker wall. And this is an example of bone that I got at the butcher shop. And it was my theory that when you go to the butcher shop and get bones, they're using young animals to process the meat. And so my thinking was if I could find an older animal, then the bones would be bigger. thicker, and so on. So I went to a packing house, and this particular bone came from a 13-year-old bull. So there's quite a difference in size between a young animal and an older animal. And here's a couple other pictures. Here's a ruler, just to give you an idea of size. There's quite a big difference in size. And there's my bone pile. I don't throw anything away. This bone at the top was given to me. It's actually an elk leg bone. And there was a place in Washington where this person, they take the roadkill and push it over the cliff and just let it, the animals in the forest take care of it. And he pulled that out of the pile and gave it to me. It's so clean, just picked clean. So if you leave it out, I suppose the ants and the birds could pick the bones clean, but a little slower process. So this is just pictures of bits and pieces and leftover bones. So here's the pieces that I've selected for making the box. I'm looking for bones that are round for making a round box. And there's two boxes going around. One is the larger one, one's a small one. One of those boxes was made from the 13-year-old bull bone, and the other one is from the butcher shop bone, so there's huge difference in size. So here's the beginning. I select the femur, which is the rear thigh bone. I'll have pictures of that a little bit later. And if you don't want to cut them up on your bandsaw, you can use a handsaw and hold it in a vise and cut the pieces. When you cut it on your bandsaw, it tends to warm the bone up a little bit and stinks really, really bad, like your worst nightmare trip to the dentist. So you might want to cut up your bone bits and then leave the shop for the night and let the dust settle a little bit. So here's the pieces. This is going to be the body of the box, and then I'm going to select one of this flat edge right here for the top, and that'll come in a little bit later slide. So here's the difference between the 13-year-old bull bone and the butcher shop bone. And you can see the big difference in wall thickness. So in order to take the greatest advantage of the wall thickness available, bones not perfectly round, I use two mandrels, one on the headstock and one on the tailstock, and I put the bone between centers and true up the ends and give me a true place to grab onto it with a chuck. And you can see now, since I've trued up the outside, you can see there I have enough wall thickness there for a box. And there's also something you need to design around. The blood needs a way to go from the inside of the bone to the outside of the bone. And I had somebody in the audience tell me one time it's called a foramen. Is that right? Foramen? He says I have it right. So you need to design that into your piece and locate it somewhere where it's not going to show, or else you need to fill it. And I like to fill it with CA glue and a little bit of bone dust, and I think I have a picture later. So there's the piece. I'm getting ready to separate this into a lid and a base. And I don't like to be taking things in and out of a chuck when I'm in the process of threading them. You can see that I've chewed up a little bit of the inside of the bone, and there's going to be it's going to be a little short on one side, but I don't mind that. I like seeing that this was a natural substance. Even my pendants have some of the natural interior of the bone on the back side. It's just a little left over. It's like leaving bark on the edge of your wood turnings. It's part of it. I don't want it to look like white plastic, so I like to leave a little natural edge. So I'm going to prepare these two pieces and mount them on their own faceplate glue blocks so that I can do the threading on each piece without having to take them in and out of a chuck. And I have a threading jig. So happens that I manufactured a threading jig for quite a few years, and it was an attachment for a lathe. And the cutter is held in the headstock, and the workpiece is held on this little jig, and it's basically like a lead screw. And my favorite thread pitch is 16 threads per inch. The cutter is a 60-degree angle cutter. It's a 60-degree dovetail cutter. It's right off the shelf. It's one that you can buy. High-speed steel, has 10 teeth, and I like to run it at about 3,000 RPM. So I'm cutting the female threads and the male threads. And once I have both pieces threaded, I make sure that they fit together before they're removed from their individual fixtures. And then I create another set of threaded fixtures to hold them so I can detail the lid of the box and the base of the box. So each one of these now is threaded onto just a wooden threaded fixture, basically, threaded piece. And I can true up more of the inside, and you can see now there's a little bit of shortage of bone right there, but I like some of that. And here's a repair that I've made with this bone dust and CA glue. The repair is right there. And the more bone dust you could pack into it, the less transparent it will be. Looks like I could have packed a little bit more bone dust on that one. And if you look on the box going around, this is actually the box that's going around, so you can see.
Could you repeat that tool that you used? What's the name of the tool was?
It's a 60-degree double angle milling cutter, and it's got a 3/8 inch shank. It's a metal cutting tool. And for the threaded part, I'll just back up a little bit. I actually take it to the grinder, and I grind off probably a good 25% or 30% of the top of that tool. It's got quite a bit of top, and I want to be able to get as close as I can. I want to cut threads as close as I can to the shoulder of the box. So that's all I've done is to modify it. And I've used these cutters I bet I had one I used for 10 years, and it got dropped one time and one tooth got chipped. It still worked fine, but for demonstrations, I didn't like to use a tool that had a chipped tooth, so I put a new one in. But they last for a long. It just doesn't have to cut very much. If you were to take that thread and lay it out, it's probably only 12 inches of cutting that it has to do. It's not much. So I've checked now the fit of the box and how it fits together. And now I'm looking for pieces that will be used for the lid and the base of the box. And this is the advantage of going to the butcher shop and looking for bones, because you can find the ones that have the flat edges. And that's also what I look for if I'm making medallion or the little pendants that I like to make. All of these pieces would be good candidates for the pendants or the box tops and bottoms. And I like to have a stash of these little discs around, because it's something quick you can put in the lathe or the rose engine lathe and make a fun little project. A fun, quick project, as John Sauer likes to say. See in here? You could cut them out in different ways. I typically use the bandsaw, but this is another way of cutting out little discs. I love them when they're nice and round like this, but I think it wastes a lot more bone. I can take better advantage of the bone if I cut them out individually with the bandsaw. And then sometimes little small pieces just need to be bleached again, so I'll put them in an airtight container and bleach them again. There's just maybe some little bits of oil or not quite white enough. So it's easier to bleach more pieces when they're cut in smaller pieces. So I'm preparing one of the pieces for the box, and I like to have the inside of the bone be the inside of the box and the outside surface of the bone be the outside of the box. So I need to make it flat on one side, and I'm just using double stick tape to attach it to a glue block. I'm not one that uses a lot of big chucks. Yes? Question? Typically, the hydrogen peroxide is active for about 3 to 5 days. The tighter you can keep the lid, the longer you can have it be active. But once it stops bubbling or fizzing, it's done. So just rinse them off.
Have you tried pool sterile type of much stronger solutions?
I have tried more, but they're dangerous to use. If you splash it on your skin, you're going to burn yourself. Yeah, so this works so well and it's cheap. We used to use a stronger hydrogen peroxide in our hot tub, and it got harder and harder to get. And then they did carry it locally, so if you have it shipped, it's a hazardous material, and you can't find it. So
once it's washed, coming out of the hydrogen peroxide, how long does it need to dry?
I don't know. I suppose you could. I just have these pieces it's not like a sponge. It's not going to soak up water. I suppose you could check it. When I check wood, I put it in a Ziploc baggie and seal it up, stick it in the microwave, warm it up. If there's steam coming out, then dry it. It's a good way to check to see if there's moisture in your piece. Don't get it too hot. It's just warm enough to be a good way to dry it, I guess. I haven't noticed that being a problem.
Will the bone bend if it's hot?
I have not been able to bend bone. I haven't tried. I don't think it would bend. I mean, it's 98 degrees in your body, and if it was going to be bendable, then we'd all be little rubber people or something, wouldn't we? I don't think that would be.
Steam temperature is a bit different.
Yeah. So this is in preparation for the lid, and you can see that there's a little piece of that void. So I use the thin CA glue, and you can see where it was repaired right there. And there's the lid fitted to this is the lid for the lid of the box, fitted in the fitting stage, I should say. I don't like to glue a flat disc to a flat surface, so I make a little step in the lid and a little matching step in the box itself. I want as much security as I can get to hold that lid in place. And I'm using CA glue to glue these pieces together. And that tiny little box that's going around got dropped, the lid got popped out, it got cracked, and I glued it back together with CA glue. I think CA glue gets more brittle with age, and I think it's probably about a 10-year shelf life, and if it gets a good knock, it's going to come apart. So I don't know if there's a better glue to glue these things together. I still use the CA glue. So it's just something to be careful of. And because I can, I will put a little rose engine work in the inside of the lid and glue that in place. And then because I can, I'll put some on the lid too. And I like to detail the joint, the glue joint, and maybe add another little bead just to create a little confusion about where the joint might be, or to not. This computer is doing something. I'm hit the. It's the little thing spinning around, and I can't hit what's going. I'm stalled.
Brad has one of these left-handed computers.
That little guy. It's doing something. Is it working? No?
Brad doesn't know how to operate his computer.
Okay, John, it's got the little rainbow thing swirling around. This little guy.
Locked up or what it's doing.
Bonnie,
Yes, we can ask questions, yeah.
one clarification, you go back, you mentioned soap to clean it.
Yep,
You need to differentiate between dishwashing soap and
Shane
dishwashing.
Keynote?
yeah, I like to use dishwasher soap
No, it's in shit.
because it seemed to be a little bit more grease cutting.
And it's anti-foaming.
Oh, well, that doesn't really matter.
You boiled it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Yes?
You thought about using a sous vide machine? Oh, that's not.
Say that again?
You thought about using a sous vide machine?
Wise guy. Did you hear the question? He wanted to know if why don't you use the sous vide machine? Does anybody know what that is? It's a way of cooking.
Start with steak.
There was a question over here? Yes. Yes. Yes, I've used antler, horn, cow hoof, pig ear. I've put it all on my lathe trying to, yeah. Antler and bone are very similar. Horn is like your fingernail. I've made nice little boxes out of horn. Thanks, John. Oh no.
Oh, you were supposed to play where it was.
Can I just scroll down there?
Yeah,
There we go.
I was jumping.
Okay. Right about. There we go. Okay, what do I not have? I have to be careful not to touch. Okay, we saw the lid and the detail of the joint. And this is the base of the box. And it has a little step also that I've created for it to sit in. And a little bit of rose engine work on that. And glue it in place.
You ever try for a compression fit?
Well, this is a tight fit, but it still needs glue. This is not a sloppy fit. This is, it's there without being held, by a tailstock or anything. It's a tight fit. I wouldn't rely on a compression fit as permanent. For this, I want it to be glued in.
Question,
Yes?
have you made any that have tapered sides on it with a dome that's tapered?
No. No. Why would I want to do that?
That would be possible.
I think it's extremely difficult to fit a taper to a taper. Very, very hard. Straight, I'm looking for straight 90-degree flat. A little bit of rose engine on the bottom and some detail to hide the joint. And that's the box that's going around. And that one's been dropped a few times. At least we have carpet in here. I've done this at other places where they had a concrete floor. And I thought, I don't want to hear it bounce. And then you hear it bounce. So these are the demo boxes that go around. And this is the difference between the young animal and the old animal. And for sanding and polishing, I like this Trizac film. It's made for finishing Corian countertops. And I have been lucky enough, like at home shows and that type of thing, where they're handing out samples. So I haven't had to go buy this stuff. But this particular one that I've been using has got the little Velcro kind of attachment on the back to use on a disc sander. And I just cut these into strips that are probably ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch wide, and that's what I use for sanding the bone. I like it because it doesn't leave the abrasive material is not left behind. Like if I was using paper sandpaper or something with a grit that could come off. I don't want anything to dirty up the bone because there are pores in it. And some parts of the bone is more porous than other parts. And if I do come across an area that is more porous, I will flood that area with thin CA glue just to keep the dirt out of it. But I really like this product for finishing. I called up the factory and asked if I could get this product without the Velcro on it, or the little grippy teeth. And they said they don't sell it that way, but he sent me a sheet of each one before it went through that process of having the little teeth put on it. And it was so nice to use. I wish they would sell it that way, because I use it on the acrylic and I use it on bone. So maybe if everybody calls up the factory, they might go beg for some pieces. So this is a little bit of a review, I guess, holding it between centers. This happened to be a little bit bigger bone. In fact, this was a giraffe bone. I found a place in Florida, I think it's called Atlantic Coral Enterprises, if I remember. And I was able to get some bigger bone. I'm always on the hunt for big bone. I was down in South Africa and, doing demonstrations, and I said to you guys have big animals, you have giraffe and elephants, and somebody brought these to me. They're actually black rhino bones, and he said, don't tell anybody they're black rhino bones, so you have to, shh, don't tell anybody. They're actually, he said, tell them they're hippo bones, but I don't know if they would. They came from a college laboratory because they have labels on them. And I was able to get these home through customs, and nobody said a word. I have not cut them up. I just can't bear to cut them up. I think they're beautiful. So here's an example of some giraffe bones, and this is from that company I was talking about. Now those are some big bones, and the wall thickness is quite a bit thicker. And I don't know how they process them. I've ordered a couple. One was split kind of badly and then repaired, and I returned it. But I think they just drill holes and blast it out with air, and the surface and the bone itself was good. It just, if they had cracks in it, I couldn't use it. How much were they? In the neighborhood of $50. Not too terrible. It's been a while since I've ordered anything. What?
What was the name of the company?
Atlantic Coral Enterprises. I think, if I'm remembering right. I think if you, with Google nowadays, it shouldn't be hard to find things like this. And this is the cannon bone from the giraffe. But this is how they display the bone for you to pick the ones you want. They send you pictures. So this is a little bit about of turning the giraffe bone. You can see I have my vacuum system right there, but see, it still collects, it doesn't get everything. This is really thick walls. That's probably nearly 5/16 of an inch easily wall thickness on that. And over the years, I've haunted antique shops and antique malls for pieces made from bone. These are natal cases that I've acquired over the years, and some of them have some ornamental turning on them, and many of them are threaded, which is kind of a fascinating for me too. And this is the bone bracelet. Actually, I'm wearing the bone bracelet today. I made this at least 15 years ago. And I've worn it and worn it. And I like the fact that it sort of develops a patina just from the oil on my own skin. It's a fun bracelet to wear. And this is a piece that I found in an antique store that I would like to duplicate someday. It's threaded, and when you take it apart, it's actually a traveling shaving brush. I don't think that's a very good, I wouldn't want to shave with that, rub that brush on my face, but I think with a nicer brush, it could be kind of fun. Screws together like that for it to be used, and then turns around and is compact for traveling. These are some letter openers. The one at the top is ivory, the one at the very bottom is bone, and the one in the middle is one I made from a particularly thick area of bone, and I have it up here on the table if you want to take a look at it. And these are just some pieces I've grabbed off the internet just to show you other things made from bone. And this is the cow skeleton, and the bone that I like to use for boxes is this one right here, the femur. And the cannon bone is the one down here. It has some thicker walls. I haven't used any other parts of I have used the hoof and the horns of cows too.
Does the skull have big flat pieces?
It probably does. I don't know. I've had somewhere in my collection I have a scapula, but I'm thinking that's not, it's going to have, be like the knuckles. It's going to be a thin layer of solid bone and then be honeycomb in between. Now, I haven't cut it because it's kind of one of those things that's too good looking to cut, you know. I've been able to get what I needed out of the bones, the thicker bones. I've seen cow skulls carved and pierced and, you know, real fancy carvings, but I've not used any part of the skull for turning. Now there's some really big cows. They would have big bones, right? And I've been trying to track down some buffalo bone. I've had people that know of people that are raising buffalo for meat and said they will send some to me, but I have yet to have it arrive on my doorstep. So I think buffalo bone would be particularly thick, in my opinion, and elephant, that would be big, wouldn't it? And lots of elephants. Occasionally I might think about ending my slideshow here, but I think this audience can handle this next slide. This is a renewable resource. And I've blocked out their identity, so. So that's it. Any questions? Richard.
Bonnie, I found a nice piece of solid circular bone. In fact, I carved it on one of my pieces on the table. And it's what they call ear button or elf button.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is the coronet of the horn.
Yep.
And that actually turns out to be, in many cases, solid bone and not cancellous bone. So
Oh.
I was quite pleased when I cut through it and realized it was probably almost half an inch thick, solid.
Okay, that's good to know. I've never cut through one of those buttons. A lot of people are using them, but I didn't realize they would be that thick. Yeah, I have a few of those actually.
Some of them are thick, solid, some are
Actually, the elk depends on when you harvest the animal.
Oh, is that right? Well, they drop their antler every year, so would it be?
It would be when the antler is in full season, it's afforded. It doesn't have the blood flow through it when it's fresh. My question is, have you ever worked with shells or mother of pearl?
Yes, yes. I have done mother of pearl. It's not. That's a dangerous substance. Also, you don't want to be breathing mother of pearl. But you can use a scraper on it. I've put them in inserts in boxes, and the mother of pearl has got a really nice depth to it. Sort of a translucent. It's nice, but that's definitely a substance you don't want to be breathing. And I cut it on my bandsaw. It was kind of brutal on the bandsaw, but it worked. D. I have no idea, but this Atlantic Coral Enterprises, I don't remember if they had elephant bone, but they had giraffe, they had camel. I don't recall the elephant bone. I don't know. No more questions? Now we're ready for lunch, right? You're all hungry after the.
When do you finish your?
Oh, well, I wet sand with that product I was talking about. I forgot to say I use wet sanding. And then I buff it with white diamond. Yeah, I don't put a finish on the bone. I just want it to be its own polish, natural surface. Thank you very much.